Right now, as you watch this, a 249-year-old empire is dying. Not slowly, not quietly, loudly, publicly, in real time. And the most disturbing part? Every single thing happening right now, the wars, the debt, the political chaos, the dollar quietly losing its grip on the world, none of it is an accident. None of it is bad luck. None of it is the fault of one president, one party, or one generation. It was always going to happen. The pattern was already written. In 1976, a British historian finished a short, almost unknown book. In it, he made a prediction so precise, so unsettling, that when you apply it to America today, it reads less like history and more like a countdown clock. I'm going to show you exactly what he found. I'm going to walk you through every stage, and at the very end of this video, I'm going to show you the moment, the specific, measurable, undeniable moment when America crossed the point of no return. You're going to want to stay until the end, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's begin. His name was Sir John Bagot Glubb. Most people have never heard of him, and that's part of the problem. He wasn't a politician, he wasn't a pundit, he was a soldier and a scholar who spent 50 years doing one thing, studying how empires die. Not one empire, not two, all of them. The Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, the Mongols, the Ottomans, the Spanish, the British. And after all of that, after 5 decades of reading, fighting, and watching, he sat down and wrote a 78-page book called The Fate of Empires. 78 pages, that's shorter than most corporate reports, but inside those pages was something that should have shaken every government on Earth. He said this: every great empire in human history goes through the exact same 5 stages, in the exact same order, without a single exception, and the average lifespan of a great empire is 250 years. 250 years. Now here's where I need you to stop and feel the weight of that number. America declared independence in 1776. You do the math. But before we get to what that means for today, we need to understand the stages, because the stages are where the real story lives. Stage 1, he calls the Age of Conquest. Every empire begins hungry, lean, disciplined. There's no wealth yet to corrupt anyone, no comfort yet to make anyone soft. The soldiers fight like their lives depend on it. Because they do. For America, this was 1776 through 1945, a revolution against the most powerful empire on Earth, a continent built from nothing, and then the most extraordinary military achievement in modern history, fighting 2 full wars simultaneously on opposite sides of the planet and winning both. That's not luck, that's a civilization operating at its absolute peak. Stage 2 is the age of commerce. Military power converts into economic dominance, trade routes, factories, growing cities, a middle class that actually feels the wealth. For America, this was the 1950s and 60s. A factory worker could buy a house, raise children, take vacations, and send his kids to college on one salary. One salary. The dollar was the most trusted currency on Earth. American science put a human being on the moon. Stage 2 feels like it will last forever. It never does. Stage 3 is the age of affluence, and this is the quiet beginning of the end. Wealth creates comfort, comfort creates complacency, and complacency creates a very specific, very dangerous belief that dominance is permanent, that sacrifice is no longer necessary, that the hard work is already done. This is when the machinery of power starts running for itself rather than for the nation. This is when military spending continues not to win wars, but to keep the machine profitable. This is when factories move overseas because it's more efficient on a spreadsheet, even though it hollows out the working class entirely. For America, this was the late 1960s through the 1990s, and it set the stage for what we're living through right now.
And I want to be very clear about what that word means, because most people misunderstand it. Decadence doesn't mean the people are immoral. It doesn't mean the culture is broken. It means the system itself has become self-destructive. The institutions that were built to protect the empire are now the greatest threat to it. And four things happen simultaneously in this stage, all reinforcing each other, which is precisely why no empire has ever escaped it. First, military spending completely separates from military results. America currently spends close to $900 billion per year on defense. That is more than the next 10 countries combined. China spends around $250 billion. Russia spends around $80 billion. And yet, America could not defeat insurgents in Afghanistan over 20 years, could not stabilize Iraq after 2 decades of occupation, is currently spending $3 million interceptor missiles to stop $50,000 drones. Now ask yourself a simple question. If any business in the world spent $900 billion and consistently produced 0 results, what would happen to it? It would collapse. But an empire in stage 4 cannot stop spending because the contractors need the contracts, the generals need the wars for their post-retirement board seats, the politicians need the donations. The spending isn't a means to victory anymore. The spending is the point. The wars are the product. Second, debt becomes existential. The national debt is now $36 trillion. America is adding roughly $2 trillion more every single year. But the number that almost nobody talks about, the number that genuinely keeps serious economists awake at night, is this one. $1 trillion per year just in interest payments. Not paying down the debt, not building anything, not funding schools or infrastructure or medical research, just servicing the interest on the money that was already borrowed. America now spends more on interest payments than China spends on its entire military. And every missile fired, every ship deployed, every operation launched adds to that number. There are only 2 exits from this kind of debt spiral: default or inflation. Both destroy the currency, and the system that created the spiral cannot stop the spiral because stopping it would require dismantling itself. Third, the currency gets weaponized until it can't be anymore. After World War II, America built the most powerful financial weapon in history, the dollar as the global reserve currency. Every country needed dollars. Every oil deal was in dollars. That gave America an almost supernatural ability to run deficits that would have destroyed any other economy. But in stage 4, that weapon gets turned on enemies: sanctions, frozen assets, financial exclusions. When America froze $300 billion of Russian reserves overnight, every other country on Earth received the same message simultaneously. Your dollars are not safe. And they responded rationally. They started moving out. Today, the BRICS nations represent over 40% of global GDP. They are actively building payment systems that bypass the dollar. Saudi Arabia is selling oil to China in yuan. Countries that were never enemies of America are quietly, methodically reducing their dollar exposure. America thought it was punishing rivals. Instead, it handed every nation on Earth the most powerful argument for abandoning the dollar that has ever existed. Fourth, the society fractures from within, while the threats from outside multiply. America has the highest homelessness rate of any developed nation. Its infrastructure, bridges, roads, water systems, is deteriorating visibly. Life expectancy, which is supposed to rise in wealthy nations, is actually falling. The wealthiest 1% now hold more assets than the bottom 90% combined. And this creates something historians recognize immediately: a population that has stopped believing in its own institutions, not because it was told not to believe in them, but because the evidence in front of their eyes every day no longer matches what those institutions promise. When people stop trusting institutions, political systems don't reform. They radicalize, they split, they offer increasingly extreme solutions to problems that the center has failed to address for decades. Now, here is the insight that ties all 4 together, and this is the part I need you to really sit with. Why doesn't someone just fix it? The people in charge can see the data. The economists understand the debt. The generals know the wars aren't working. The politicians can read the polls. So why doesn't anyone fix it? because of something called the prisoner's dilemma. And in stage 4, it operates at civilizational scale. Every individual actor makes the perfectly rational choice for themselves. The defense contractor funds the politicians who keep the contracts flowing. The politician takes the money and votes for the spending. The general plans for wars that justify the budget. The bank profits from financing the debt. The media profits from the conflict. Every single decision is individually rational. The collective result is collective destruction. There is no villain in this story. There doesn't need to be. The system produces the outcome automatically, and because everyone inside it benefits from keeping it exactly as it is, no one inside it can change it. Glubb looked at every empire that reached stage 4. Not one of them reformed itself from within. Not one.
Now, I promised you something at the beginning of this video. I told you there was a specific moment, a measurable, undeniable crossing of the line. Here it is. For an empire to remain in stage 3, the age of affluence, it must be able to afford its ambitions. The debt grows, yes, but the economy grows faster. The currency holds, the middle class holds. Cracks appear, but the foundation is still solid. The moment that changes is the moment stage 4 truly begins. For America, historians will likely mark it as 2008, not because of the financial crisis alone, but because of what happened after it. After 2008, America made a choice. It printed money to save the banks. It did not prosecute the architects of the collapse. It did not rebuild the manufacturing base. It did not address wage stagnation. It doubled down on financial engineering over real production. It began the longest uninterrupted debt expansion in its history. And at the same moment, China's GDP was rising so fast that the gap in military spending advantage was closing every year. At the same moment, Russia began rebuilding its strategic posture. At the same moment, the BRICS framework began the long, slow, serious conversation about what comes after the dollar. 3 independent forces, 3 rational actors, all moving in the same direction at the same time. Glubb called this dominant strategy convergence. When multiple independent powers all take actions that lead to the same outcome, it is not a conspiracy. It is not coordinated. It is simply every nation doing what is best for itself. The result converges anyway. And the result they are all converging on is stage 5. Stage 5 is not an explosion. It is not a single day or a single war. It is a slow, grinding realization by every nation on Earth that the empire at the center can no longer enforce its own rules. Britain learned this between 1939 and 1949, the largest empire in history, reduced to a secondary power in 1 decade. Not because Britain was defeated militarily, but because the money ran out, the Allies left, and the internal will to hold it together collapsed simultaneously. America is not Britain. America is larger, more complex, and more nuclear. The transition will be different in its details, but Glubb's framework, tested across 3,000 years in every major civilization, suggests the direction is not in question. The question, the only question that matters now, is what comes next. Because every time an empire reaches stage 5, power does not disappear, it transfers. And understanding where it transfers, how it transfers, and who shapes the world that comes after, that is the analysis that will actually determine your future. That is what we cover next. But for today, understand this. The pattern is not a theory, it is a record, a 3,000-year record with no exceptions. America is 249 years old, and everything you are watching right now is not chaos. It is a pattern, right on schedule.